Okay, we'll go ahead and kick us off. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time zone you're in, I'd like to welcome you to International Medical Corps' first global briefing of 2024. My name is Rebecca Milner. I'm International Medical Corps' Chief Advancement Officer, and I'd like to start today's briefing by thanking you for joining us and thanking our many supporters on the call for your generosity and commitment to our work. Over the past year, we've responded to a number of natural disasters, including the earthquakes in Syria and Turkey, Morocco, Afghanistan, flooding in Libya, and persistent drought conditions in the Horn of Africa that have pushed people to the brink of famine there. But today, we're going to focus on two ongoing deadly conflicts, the war in Ukraine and the crisis in Israel and Gaza. Your support is what makes it possible for us to respond in these difficult and dangerous environments and to save and change lives around the world. So again, thank you. We're going to keep today's briefing as efficient as possible. We're going to wrap up in about 45 minutes. Toward the end of our conversation, we'll take questions from the chat. So as we talk, please feel free to type in your questions and we'll do our best to get to them. I am very happy to welcome colleagues who will share updates on our responses and what we've accomplished together, and then talk a little bit about some of the challenges that remain on the horizon. First, let me introduce Matthew Stearns. Matthew is our country director in Ukraine, having previously served as country director for us in Afghanistan and South Sudan. Matthew has worked in the humanitarian sector for nearly 2 decades and is no stranger to working in complex conflict environments, including Chad, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, and Haiti. Welcome, Matthew. Next up is Ronny Elfassy, our Deputy Director of Emergency Response Operations. Ronny has more than a dozen years of experience in humanitarian work as a logistics and operations specialist, leading disaster response deployments around the world. At International Medical Corps, he manages critical emergency supplies, from sourcing and warehousing to deploying and setting up a field hospital, such as the one that we currently have in Gaza. Welcome, Ronny. Finally, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Michael Grady, who has volunteered for International Medical Corps in both Ukraine and Gaza. After training as an OBGYN surgeon in Detroit, Michael founded and ran a large practice in the Atlanta area for many years. Driven by a desire to give back, he has focused on humanitarian work during his career and his retirement. He's traveled to Haiti at least 40 times and has made 3 trips to West Africa during the Ebola outbreak. And Michael has traveled with us to Ukraine 4 times to help deploy trauma care training to Ukrainian clinicians, and recently returned from a deployment with our field hospital in Gaza. Michael, we're so glad you were able to join us as well. Welcome to you all, and we're so appreciative of everything that you do for International Medical Corps. I think we'll start with Ukraine. Matthew, last Saturday, Ukrainians marked a rather grim anniversary. It's been 2 years since the full-fledged invasion of their country by Russian forces. I think we all know that the country was fighting a proxy war since 2014 in the southeast, where 30 International Medical Corps staff members based in Mariupol had been providing medical and mental health services to vulnerable people on the front lines. But then the invasion happened, and International Medical Corps immediately began expanding our operations there. Now, 2 years later, we have more than 400 staff operating out of 9 offices across the country, providing response services that are designed specifically for the circumstances that each different community faces in Ukraine. In total, we've reached more than 9 million people, and the team in Ukraine and under your leadership, Matthew, has been doing incredible work. And you've seen firsthand how our response has expanded and really changed the lives of many people in Ukraine. Can you kind of give us an overview of what we've accomplished so far?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca. The numbers are huge there, right? I mean, our response has just been so robust since scaling up from February 24th of 2022. Which we really launched. We made, agency-wide kind of made a commitment to a whole of country response. And we spread out far, we spread out wide, we refused to leave, we committed to staying. And we were one of the first partners, right, to sort of commit in this full-scale way to being a frontline humanitarian actor in this space. We concentrated on what we know how to do best, right? Healthcare, primary and emergency healthcare, mental health care, psychosocial services, gender-based violence interventions. We were even doing some nutrition back then, and we still are, but things are changing a bit in Ukraine, as you know, Rebecca. And we're now in 14, we call them oblasts here, effectively states in Ukraine, with the 9 offices running, reached over 9 million people so far. At the same time, the new estimate that just came out recently from the UN is 2024, we'll see about 14.6 million people in need of acute humanitarian assistance. Still a staggering number, a lot of work to do. We're focused in localized response, right? So we're working really closely with the Ukrainian government at national level, also at local level, to make sure that the plans that we make, according to the needs that we've identified, and we see those needs coming up in the communities where we serve already, and new communities that are being impacted by the progression of the conflict here. It's just a matter of fact that Russia is making some advances lately. In recent months, they are gaining territory, and that has an immediate impact on beneficiary needs, population displacement. And so we're adjusting and working with our donors and our government counterparts to try to adapt to these. These are needs that we've recognized before. We understand what they are. We can anticipate them. The problem, of course, is that the numbers are huge. And the resourcing, while generous, right? I mean, and I want to thank everyone on this call who's been generous to support us. The help means so much to us, and we try to do right by your generosity every single day. But at the same, I have to be accurate here, right? I mean, we are the funding picture is going down a bit from our institutional donors. We're relying more and more on people that can donate privately or corporate donors to try to plug in some of the gaps there, because these needs are continuing, right? They're continuing, they're emerging. We're ready to respond, and we are responding. But there is a sense that the war is kind of outpacing our ability collectively as the humanitarian sector to take care of everyone. So we're still, we feel confident, we're adaptive, we're agile. We're working in over 120 healthcare facilities to support them. Our mental health programming is really gaining a lot of steam on a national level, and then also getting some global recognition. Gender-based violence interventions also getting more and more traction. A sector here, a humanitarian way of working that is new to a lot of the communities that we've arrived in, right? And so there's been a sort of learning curve there, and we're seeing more and more traction and acceptance and engagement on women and girl-centered programming, something that we're really proud of here. War, of course, always adversely impacting these vulnerable groups. Women and girls, elderly folks, people with disabilities, et cetera. So that's our primary kind of targeted cohort there across all these sites where we work. Yeah, so that's kind of an overview of where we are. And the 2-year anniversary was definitely a solemn demarcation. You could feel it in the office. The staff that I see, every day here, day in and day out, it was a somber mood. That being said, I've worked in a lot of in contexts where I've seen incredible human resilience, and astounding human resilience that I've seen in some of the places where I work. And Ukraine is now sort of world famous for their resilience, and I can tell you that it's real, it's impressive and powerful. And while we passed that 2-year mark and there was a solemn sort of undertone, there's still an incredible reserve of commitment and resolve to not only responding to the crisis as Ukraine, a country, but also from a humanitarian point of view now. There has never been a response to this scale in the modern period here for Ukraine. There was some engagement back in before 2022 on humanitarian, but the scale of it now is really something else. And what we've seen is hundreds and thousands of Ukrainian national staff, including about 400 of our own, really rising to the occasion, understanding what humanitarian work is, and putting themselves out there every single day in this, brutal conflict to try to be of service to their compatriots. It's really quite moving. I'm really impressed and proud of the work that we've done. I'm going to pause there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is tremendous what the team has managed to accomplish. And, you mentioned sort of the support of the Ministry of Health. I mean, most people on the call know that training is the foundation of everything that we do at International Medical Corps. And it's essentially how we help ensure longer term results and self-reliance in the communities in which we operate. But let me turn to you, Michael. I mean, you've been to Ukraine 4 times now as part of our work with Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. And that initiative is to train Ukrainian doctors and nurses in emergency and trauma care. Can you talk a little bit about why we needed to do this training in Ukraine, which has a fairly advanced medical system, and talk a little bit about how we approach this and the training that we carried out?
Yeah, so we partnered with the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative to teach trauma care. So they do have fairly advanced medical care in Ukraine. It is different than it is, for example, in the United States. They don't have the type of emergency rooms that you might expect. So their emergency room doctors, if you will, sort of work on ambulances to see people. And then there was all the shifting sand. So you can imagine how many emergency type people were called to the front, and that left voids. And then, of course, nurses and doctors and support staff were then called to deliver emergency care. And they were just not trained to do that. And
right.
So early on in our training, or as we were doing this training, we saw so many people from different sectors of the society. For example, we would have emergency doctors, we would have nurses in the class. We also had a ballet teacher who showed up, who just wanted to learn to deliver care. So the type of teaching we were doing ranged from simple sort of stop the bleed, which is a sort of a canned course that we teach. It's, a couple-hour course where anybody can learn to stop bleeding, or hemorrhage, to a more advanced trauma life support course, which is a couple-day course, which involves putting chest tubes in and intubation, more advanced type things. As we did this, we took the students who seemed to be not only the most interested, but the most engaging with other people, and we asked them to begin to teach with us. And suddenly we had a large cohort of students who were pretty good at teaching. And so no longer would we need translators. We would have these students teaching. And then from that group of students, from that group of teachers, we developed what we called a master class, where we took the best of those teachers, and they're actually now running these teaching programs throughout Ukraine. And so it's really been pretty cool to watch them take ownership of this. When I've taught here in the United States before, some students are interested, some students are in class because they have to be to have to get their hours in or have a course or something. And some are on their phones and some are paying attention. All of these students were on the edge of their seats listening. So it was.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important that you mentioned the master trainers and the focus on cascading the training, right? I mean, that's what's going to be sustainable. And International Medical Corps continues to support that cascaded training. But, you've been there kind of in the early days when the conflict was sort of really active and, very much close to the front lines. I mean, can you talk a little bit about sort of how we adapted that training and maybe some of the training took place in bomb shelters, right? Maybe give some examples of sort of the challenges that we had to tackle.
Yeah, so everybody in Ukraine has, like they do all over the world, has a cell phone.
Uh-huh.
Everybody has an app on their cell phone that is linked into the air raid siren system in Ukraine. So when there are incoming missiles, your cell phone will go off and will alert you to take shelter. And they would go off so frequently that people begin to ignore them. Good or bad, that happened. But in the early days when we were near to the front line, and even later, you could hear missiles dropping, bombs going off. And during those times, we would go to the air raid shelters, the bomb shelters. But the students were still demanding to be taught. And because they demanded to be taught, we insisted on teaching. And so we did. We wound up having classes in the bomb shelter, which just turned the intensity up. It made the need of what we were doing so obvious, so evident that we just committed to continuing to do what we do well, which is to teach.
Great. Amazing. And Matthew, I mean, this sort of round of trauma care training, I mean, we have a long list of kind of training activities that we would like to carry out, in conjunction with the Ministry of Health. Maybe you could talk about some of the things that we have planned to do in the coming year.
Yeah, sure. So we really built on that program that Dr. Grady was helping us get started, and it has gained so much traction. There's so much appetite and response and enthusiasm for that program. We've got some generous support from BHA to roll out, let's say, a capstone module on advanced enhanced trauma care, mass catastrophe preparation in terms of chemical, biological, and nuclear attacks that are part of the possible reality here. And the goal of this capstone project is to fully localize this set of trainings and the core kind of curriculum that was developed with HHI and IMC, and integrate it into the Ukrainian healthcare university system, and effectively hand over the training package, right, to a network of Ukrainian medical universities so they can replicate this and fully localize it. It's an ambitious plan. It's completely possible. And we hope to have it sort of done, by the end of the summer of 2024. So that's in the works, and it's really exciting. Very proud of that one.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the Israel-Gaza crisis. I mean, we all have been following this from October 7th. In Israel, we are supporting a longtime partner in its emergency response and recovery efforts to help those who've been hardest hit, including vulnerable, younger, disabled, and older people. And our partner is also deploying long-term healthcare services, providing specialized trauma rehabilitation, and developing community-based mental health initiatives for those affected. But in Gaza, I mean, where International Medical Corps had a presence prior to October 7th, we've deployed a sizable emergency field hospital in Rafah to treat the most vulnerable. Hundreds of our staff are treating thousands of civilians every week. Since January 6th, we've provided more than 20,000 individual health consultations and conducted 500 surgeries. The hospital offers inpatient and outpatient services, surgical care for trauma, physical rehabilitation, comprehensive emergency and obstetric care. And then we have some ancillary services that we also offer around protection, advanced mental health, water sanitation, hygiene, and nutrition services. And, as we've been talking about the field hospital, everybody asks, I mean, it's such a enormous undertaking. How did International Medical Corps do it? I mean, Ronny, maybe you could kind of share like what those early days were like and what it was like to kind of work from concept to implementation on the ground.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I on a daily basis, I still get these questions from different organizations or even UN agencies asking, how did you guys do it? And I'm not sure I know, but one thing I can say for sure is that we have an incredible team, and that's really the core of what it takes to get this thing set up. From day one, we were committed to setting up this field hospital. We knew the needs were there already at the beginning, and we knew what it would become. And so, there were various stages where there were some agencies, or we could see that there were some doubts or some challenges arising, but we were pretty committed. We're going to get this done, and so that's how we approached it, by having conversations with different authorities, with the UN, saying this is what we want to do, and how can you help, or how can we partner up to get this done. So initially, we have what we call our EMT Type 1, which is our outpatient clinic, pre-positioned in the US, and that's what we kind of know. We were certified by WHO as a Type 1, and so we're ready with that. But now what we're doing is we increase that to a Type 2 field hospital. And so that's a whole other challenge. So what we have to do there, from day one, we started working with our partner FedEx in the US to make sure that the supplies were pulled from the racks, ready to go. And then the major challenge of the supply chain was that everything had to go through El Arish airport in Egypt in order to get into Gaza. And so this is a military airport that really only accepts certain types of aircraft. Very limited number of airlines can actually land there. And so that's the first challenge. The second is that we're not registered in Egypt, so we have to find a consignee that are willing to accept our supplies there, and then until we get them into Gaza. So that was kind of the early days, a bit of a struggle. We worked with WHO to be able to get that done. We worked with the Egyptian authorities and the Egyptian Red Crescent as well. So they were all fully aware of what we were trying to do and gave us their full support. So then we deployed from the US 124 pallets of supplies. This includes dangerous goods like generators. You name it, that we had over there, very complicated items to ship. And then from the Netherlands,
Ronny, when you say dangerous goods, you mean things that have batteries and what?
Exactly, yeah. So they're considered classified as hazmat, and so you have to provide proper packaging, proper labeling. Some of the labeling you can't get done until you actually have your consignee. So we're doing this all last minute. This is always a struggle for us. Luckily, we work with FedEx, who have an in-house team at their warehouse, and they're just waiting for us to tell them the information. They're ready to go. I mean, it doesn't matter what time, at night, on the weekend. And so they helped us get everything ready. And then we're talking with our freight forwarders, like, how can we fit all of this? What kind of airplane can we use? And so the other supplies that we were bringing in from the Netherlands, that was 2 20-foot containers. These are our operating theaters. They're fully equipped, ready to go. And then 140 pallets on top of that. So then, that's, another challenge. How do you fit these containers into an airplane? So we worked on all of that, and we got things in the air. As you're going into El Arish, you need to get landing permits for a military airport. Very difficult to do, and not something that we're used to doing, by the way. And then, so we got that, and then, and we're not sleeping at this point. It's day and night. And then another tricky part is that once things land in El Arish, you are now in the Northern Sinai Government Area in Egypt, which is a limited area where there's no access for civilians. So we have limited visibility on our supplies landing. Very difficult for us to kind of do some control, to work with, there's limited amount of companies, trucking companies and all of that. So that's where we had to collaborate very closely with the WHO, with the Egyptian Red Crescent. They did have access. We did manage to get 2 of our staff there. And that was great. So we could kind of work together with them. And so basically what happens is everything lands in El Arish, gets cross-checked by the Egyptian Red Crescent, gets loaded up onto trucks, and then all of these trucks are waiting in queue. Now, a lot of you may have heard that there were massive lineups of trucks waiting to go through several checkpoints. The scanners, there's the scanning on the Israeli side, and there's the scanning on the Egyptian side to scan every single pallet to make sure that these are supplies that are allowed to enter into Gaza. So there's a long list of items that may get rejected or may not be allowed to enter. Some of those were on our list, so we had to work closely with the authorities to prove how are we going to control these supplies, how are we going to use them in Gaza. We wanted to make sure that everything moves together, that nothing gets stuck or gets rejected, and we had 14 trucks all moving together. So that was a very difficult thing to do. Once the trucks start moving from the airport, they enter into this area where there's no more cell signal. So to even track your trucks, and you don't know what's happening. They could be getting rejected at the scanners. You basically wait until they show up at Rafah at the border, and then they tell you, we're here, we're in line. Now, we worked with the UN to make sure, we worked with the UN, Palestinian Red Crescent, and Egyptian Red Crescent to make sure that our supplies are prioritized. This is a field hospital, so there was some prioritization at some point for food, and then medicine, and it kept kind of changing. But what we were worried about is stuff that were on our trucks, like chairs and tables, might get put to the bottom of the list and then not get in. So we made sure everyone was aware this is all a field hospital. Everything needs to go in. And that worked very well. Now because we had a team in Gaza already, then we had kind of visibility on that end. And so we were able to work with the Log Cluster, World Food Program, to have, as soon as they pass over to that kind of border area in Rafah, all of the trucks have to offload and then load up again on new trucks in Gaza. So we made sure that we had all of that lined up, and then got to the side. And the last thing I'll bring up there, which was a major challenge, is that the inpatient supplies that we brought in from the Netherlands, these were supplies that were somewhat new to us, at least to my team. And so the vendor that we purchased the supplies from said that they would come depending on the security situation and help us set them up. They have some engineers and they can show us how to set everything up. The date that we actually managed to get the supplies moving, there was an increase in violence in the area, and they decided that it's too dangerous for them to go. So now we had to figure out, okay, how are we going to set this up without having ever seen these before? So, last minute, we got a team of about 7 to fly to the Netherlands and in 2 days get trained on how to set the entire hospital up and then fly into Gaza. And this is, getting staff into Gaza was already a challenge in and of itself, working with the UN, making sure that everything gets cleared and that they can move in. But really incredible team, really brave. They all went in and got the thing set up within days. So it was incredible.
Amazing. And Michael, you ran our emergency department there out of the field hospital for several weeks. Tell us a little bit about the patients that were coming in, what you saw, and how we were able to, meet those needs.
Yeah, so my job was much easier than Ronnie's. So it was just taking care of people. So just floods of people. So we had the outpatient department, which, initially was seeing 60, 70 people in a day, which seemed like a lot. And within days, they were seeing 400 people in a day. In the emergency room, we started off with, a half a dozen people in a day. And then within days after that, we were seeing 30, 40, 50 people at a time were coming in as mass casualty events. So sorting through that and then kind of developing the plans of how are we going to manage all of these people? And then what are we going to do with them? For example, on day 2, a young woman came in who had been involved in some type of explosion, was critically injured, critically sick. She needed chest tubes. And, we wound up putting those in. We put a breathing tube in her. And then we realized there's no place to send her. Like, there are no ventilators available in all of Gaza. And so, we have this term DNR, do not resuscitate, that we typically use for the elderly here in more developed countries where, somebody has reached the end of their life and don't want, somebody thumping on their chest and putting breathing tubes in. We call them do not resuscitate. We soon realized that all of Gaza was like that. All of Gaza was do not resuscitate. And learning how to deal with that, both in how to provide good care and then how to deal with that on an emotional basis, for people that were caregivers that are used to being more aggressive. And then we were sort of forced to open the inpatient part of our unit, our actual overnight hospital, which is sort of new to IMC to do this. And we were forced to do that one day, like on day 4, when 40 patients came in at one time from a mass casualty event, and we had them on the floor of the emergency room. We had them on cots, and then we just needed some place to put them. So that sort of forced us to burst the door open, to the inpatient department. Mm-hmm. I remember talking to sort of the head medical lead of the unit, who's sort of head of IMC World Medical Response, and saying, have you seen the movie Jaws? And he said, yeah. And I looked at him and I said, we're going to need a bigger boat. And that was true. And so, it was really quite dramatic to be there and to be part of that. And one of the biggest problems is there's no Amazon.com.
Right.
So when you realize you need something like name tags and they didn't come across and you forgot to get them or you forgot to get them, what do you do? How do we identify who's a doctor, who's a nurse, who's a stretcher bearer? So things like that became these, not irritants, but little challenges that
daily problems that you had to solve, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, the facility is phenomenal. I mean, I know that our team is doing, I don't know, a dozen surgeries every day, delivering maybe up to 10 babies a day. I mean, we have the capacity, right, to do C-sections and emergency obstetric care and to provide obstetric services in general, right? I mean, those are all really important.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, it is amazing. I mean, this is a hospital that is made of tents. Some of it is inflatable. Some of it are, like trucks that have been turned into operating rooms. So it really is amazing, what they have been able to do. There's a young boy over there who came in on day 2 or 3 that we were open, who had a brain injury, and nobody else was able to take care of him. And so suddenly we operated on his head, and he did pretty well. Very, very proud to be a part of the team that was able to do this, for so many people.
Right. Well, so the original hospital had 50 beds. I mean, we're already up to 140 beds. We have been expanding this with different partners, have been supplying different tents and more beds, WHO, for example. So we're already up to 140 beds. I know that the team has bigger plans, Ronny, to, continue to expand and meet the needs to the extent that we can. I don't know if you have any insight into what you think is coming down the pike, Ronny.
Sure. I mean, we're facing two issues. One is the incredible need for additional capacity in terms of beds and in terms of operating theaters, because from what I understand, I mean, we were reaching last I spoke to our team lead, there was a waiting list of 45 people waiting for surgery because we just didn't have enough space to carry out these surgeries. The other is, the security situation on the ground. We're not sure what the future might hold. We are worried about ground invasion into Rafah, which would make it very complicated for us to continue to serve in the location that we're looking at. So that we are in. So we were kind of trying to juggle all these pieces and see what we do from here. The focus right now is to increase our capacity. We have additional operating theaters that are on their way. We're currently using the EU has consolidated humanitarian flights that go into El Arish every 2 weeks or so. So we're bringing in some supplies there, and we're working with our partner Airlink to charter over these operating theaters, these 20-foot containers, as soon as we can. So that's in the works. We're also we did have additional pre-positioned tents that IMC had in stock, and so as soon as we heard, okay, we need these now urgently, we got going on getting those over. We're facing difficulties with the supply chain because to get them into Egypt, you really need to charter a plane. And that can be very limiting because if you're buying 10 pallets of medical supplies, it doesn't really make sense to then go and charter a plane for $500,000 or whatever it might cost. So everyone is focusing now on the Jordan supply route that has opened up.
That was one of our guest questions.
Right.
Asking about the land route. How is that working?
Yeah, so we're optimistic about that. We have a long-standing country mission in Jordan, so we have capacity there. We have partners there that are very able to support. If we're bringing supplies in or exporting supplies. The Law Cluster has set up there, and they are working on convoys that initially started out as kind of pilot tests, and now are actually happening pretty frequently. There are still challenges. From Jordan, there are two routes, one that goes south through Aqaba into Egypt. Some challenges there are importing into Egypt, and then also you still have to go through the scanner over there and then go into Rafah. So it is still challenging, that route. The other route, which is going through King Hussein Bridge into what's called Allenby Crossing, so that's going through Israel and then through Kerem Shalom into Gaza. That one is working well, but it does have its challenges. So what you're looking at there is offloading supplies at the one crossing at King Hussein Bridge onto trucks that are able to drive through Israel, and then offloading again when you reach the Gaza border, and then loading onto those trucks that are able to drive in Gaza. So that's risky. And you're also looking at, you'd have to use smaller trucks. The Law Cluster recently worked on, they got a solution to bring the trucks all the way across through to Gaza from Jordan. So they bypassed that first transshipment, which helps a lot. And if that continues, then we're solving that one problem. But right now we're moving a lot of our medical supplies through that route through Jordan. And if it continues this way, then we'll establish a bigger kind of coordination base there. The one remaining problem is that staff and people movement still need to happen through Rafah, through Egypt. And so we do have to still maintain both of those corridors to make sure that we're operating efficiently.
Right. Well, we just have a few minutes left. I want to respect everyone's time, but maybe we could kind of wrap up with a question around, it's you all are working in these incredibly difficult, conflict environments. I mean, where when you're on the ground, you can really, never escape the potential danger. But how do you hold on to kind of hope and purpose in that environment? I mean, Matthew, maybe you could start and go from there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for touching on that, Rebecca. So I'm lucky in the sense that I'm surrounded by a country that has resilience and grit for days. So it's infectious. This Ukrainian um, drive toward, you know, um, a better future for themselves, taking care of the people who are impacted by this. It really is. I'm inspired every single day. I have really bonded with we have expatriates here too, who very experienced group of international staff who really know their way around a difficult environment and draw a lot of strength together that way. But in particular, the Ukrainian nationals are a very special group of people that keep us all motivated. So I'll mention it that way.
Yeah. Michael, what about you? I mean, both in Ukraine and Gaza. I mean, well, Gaza's probably most top of mind because you just returned, but how did you feel returning, and what keeps you hopeful about the future there?
Yeah, I mean, reentry is always difficult. You know, you always feel a little guilty for not being there still. I do have hope. These are, you know, human beings. Um, and so I think you have to draw hope in the good, you know, or from the good. You have to realize that these are people that we're taking care of, and then continuing to take care of ourselves and taking care of each other. Um, I am positive about this. I think it's a terrible, terrible situation. I do think it's going to get better. Um, you know, and hopefully this will stop soon, and we'll be able to rebuild the medical community.
Right. I mean, and Ronnie, I mean, from a logs perspective, from a logistics perspective, I mean, you just knock down challenges every day. I mean, so that can get kind of tiring. I mean, but so how do you keep motivated? I mean, how does that, because you're just constantly unknotting problems.
Yeah, I find, I mean, number one, we have just the team effort that we have. Our team is like a family. I've been telling that to people for weeks now. We really feel like a family, and you have to be, because you're with each other for 16 hours a day. So you really have to figure out how to get along, but we're all so passionate and so motivated. And when you get to a disaster response, I feel like the adrenaline just keeps going, and you're working these crazy hours. That I find the tricky part is how to learn how to take some rest, because everyone wants to just keep going and keep going. And the tough part now is these responses, these kinds of disasters that are coming up are prolonged. And, just in the Gaza response, I mean, it's been going on for a while at full pace. And it's tough. It's really tough to keep going. The adrenaline does run out, but then you just work with your team and you see the incredible work. I remember in one response, this is unrelated to these, but one response I was on, we had set up a water filtration system. And I usually, as a logistician, I'm usually in the background, so I don't get to talk much with the beneficiaries. But I remember someone came up to me and said, does this mean we're not going to get cholera now? Because their community was suffering from an outbreak of cholera. And it just really hit me hard. Like, okay, this is what we're doing here. So it's really motivating.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible work that you all are doing. And I just also want to reiterate how much we appreciate everyone's support on the call. You all help make all of this possible. And so just thank you so much. Matthew, Michael, Ronny, thanks for participating today. And we look forward to seeing everyone on our next briefing call in the coming weeks. So thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.